Okay, how's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, so in this episode, I want to try to say something about the French philosopher and mystic Simone Weil and her great 1924 essay called "The Iliad" or "The Poem of Force." Okay, but before I get to that specifically, let me back up a bit and try to give some context because I think it's important. Okay, so first of all, it's important to see that the poem of force was written in some sense as a response to and as a commentary of World War II. I mean, we should keep in mind that Weil, being French, was a witness to the events there, to the war with Hitler and to the fall of France. In one way, then, the poem of force is a sort of document of its time. It's a testament to Weil as an eyewitness to that awful period, a period which was certainly the most extreme modern expression of brute force. So, on one level, then, the poem is her attempt to understand and grapple with the destructive effects of power and might and with the sufferings of those all around her. Okay, but the poem is not just about this particular period. Rather, I would say that it's really about force and about power in general. It's about the wider implications of power in all times and in all places. More specifically, the overarching theme of the poem is about the sinister and terrible changes exerted by force upon both its victims and its perpetrators who possess it. It's about the effects of force on the human psyche or spirit as a whole. Okay, so now what Weil does is she uses Homer's Iliad to show this. And that's because she thought that not only was the Iliad a great work of art, of course, but more specifically because it presented the most clear-eyed and transparent view of the ubiquitous and dehumanizing consequences of force, of the evil and the futility of war. I mean, as she says in the first line of the poem, it's force itself that's the true hero or central character of the Iliad. It's not Achilles or Hector or somebody else. Okay, well, so what sorts of things does she point out in her treatment of the Iliad then? Well, so first of all, there are all the detailed accounts of death on the battlefield, with their focus on individual limbs and body parts. So what is she saying about this? Well, quite clearly that force literally turns persons into parts, into objects or things, into corpses. One minute they're here, and the next they're gone, cold, inanimate, and lifeless. But here's the thing. So Weil gets more subtle. That's to say, Weil says that this sort of dehumanization also applies to those still living too. Now, what she means by this is that it's not just that force reduces people to dead matter. It's that a victim in the hands of a subjugator who hasn't yet been killed is already dead inside of themselves. This is the defeated person who tries to supplicate their conqueror. That's to say, in the wake of the imminent force that they're faced with, they have already capitulated to the nothingness that they know is their fate. They've given up. They've ceased to exist even before the last fatal shot. Okay, and then there's more. That's to say, force does even more damage. Weil says that there are also those who are taken to be used as slaves, like Andromache, or others in the Iliad. And what the enslaved suffer, Weil suggests, is nothing less than a long, dragged-out death in life. In her own words, they're consigned to a life that death congeals before abolishing. Okay, well, you get the point, right? Whether it's a straight-up murder or the dehumanization of victims or slaves, the empire of force ravages life and leaves absolutely nothing in its wake. Okay, but now you might be thinking that, well, wait a second. Not everybody is a casualty of force. I mean, those who possess the force, the conquerors, the dictators, they're benefited by it. They're not victimized by it, right? But actually, no, says Weil. It turns out that conquerors and victors are as much subordinated to force as the conquered. Now, why? Well, not only does wielding force deform their soul, but more importantly, their power seduces them into a kind of blind confidence, one that is contradicted by the eventual reversal of fortunes of war. I mean, sure, force might victimize some sooner rather than later, but eventually all will be sucked into its net. That's to say, the possessors of force only possess it for a short time. They are transient possessors. The truth of the matter is that you can go from victor to victim with one unexpected spear thrust, right? So, like death, force is the great leveler. It will eventually do away with any differences between people. I mean, Patroclus dies, and then Hector, and then Achilles. There just is no long-term victor in the game of force. War and force will kill those who kill, period. Okay, but here's the thing. It's this basic wisdom that's lost on those who are wielding their power and their violence and their immoderation over others. Conquerors and dictators just think that they're invulnerable. They think that being in possession of force will secure their position of dominance. But here's the thing. They're wrong. You can't use force while at the same time evading its lethal effects on yourself. The goddess Nemesis will punish those who abuse force and who ignore moderation. She will restore equilibrium. Violation of measure will eventually bring certain retribution. Now, this is part of the insidious effects of force, though. That dictators and tyrants think that they're masters of it somehow. They think that they're in control. But really, they are part of a monstrous machine. They march to war with an automaton enthusiasm that prevents them from noticing that they're possessed by and not in possession of force. And again, this is why their triumph is temporary and why it will eventually be stripped away from them. Because they're under the grip of force and so guaranteed to bring upon themselves the very suffering they so arrogantly inflict on others. You know, I think on some level, Achilles knew something like this all along. He knew that the might that he was blessed with and wielded without moderation was also at the same time the mechanism of his eventual undoing. Bye for now.